Welcome back everyone to another video on the Hero Arts YouTube channel. This is Mindy, and in today's video I'm going to show you how I added detail to the wings of my Phoenix Bird fancy die cut, and also how I created these wispy backgrounds using some alcohol inks. Here's a look at the Phoenix Bird fancy die cut. I fell absolutely in love with this when I saw it. So what I'm going to start with is die cutting it from some cardstock. I have pumpkin and dove white cardstock from Hero Arts. And once I die cut them, I'm just going to kind of push that out. And also you'll want to save those two pieces of cardstock because you can use these negative pieces for future cards. Now the first thing I want to do is I'm going to take some red royal ink and a blending tool, and I am going to add some of that ink to the edges of my wings. Now I'm doing this first before I do anything else because I'm going to end up heat embossing on this later on, and I want this ink to be nice and dry so that when I do emboss, it's going to stick where I want it and not all over this ink that I'm applying. So I'm just blending those edges, adding little bits, and this is going to give it some shading and a little bit of dimension, just kind of makes it stand out a little bit more. Now this looks really great on its own, but later on after this dries, we'll step it up a notch. So I'm going to set this off on the side to dry for a little bit. And then I'm going to start working on creating some backgrounds. And to do that, I'm going to be using some alcohol inks. Now, the first one that's really important is going to be that Snow Cap Mixative. And because I'm going to be working on black Yupo paper. So I'm also using a puffer tool and some blending solution. Some of the other colors I'm using are Gilded, Sunset Orange, Cobalt, and Pool. And I started off by cutting this Yupo paper to 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. The Snow Cap Mixative and the Gilded, you want to make sure you shake up really, really well. Then I added a couple drops of blending solution, a couple drops of that Snow Cap Mixative, and then one of the colors. Then I'm just taking that puffer tool and moving that ink around. And now you can see this is looking amazing. I could have really stopped at any point, but to be honest, it had been a while since I worked with alcohol inks. And you need that mixative in order for the color to show up on the black. Now, when I'm filming, it was kind of hard to see where everything was because I have a really bright light on, and it looks a lot different viewing it from this angle where I'm doing a voiceover. So at any point I could have stopped and this would have been great. But one of the fun things about alcohol inks is you can just play and play and play, and nothing is ever going to come out exactly the same. So I'm just continuing to add little bits of blending solution and some of that Gilded. You can see where that kind of gathers on the edges and just has this beautiful gold shine to it. Now the black Yupo paper that I'm working on, or the black cardstock, it's a synthetic paper, which means that this ink is not going to get absorbed into this cardstock. It's kind of a slick surface. So that is key when working with alcohol inks. You can't use a regular cardstock with it. You want that synthetic paper to it. So you can just keep adding the blending solution and the inks till you achieve the look that you're looking for. Now, some of these may not look like much at first, but once we add that die cut, it looks really amazing. And this inspiration came from Pinterest. I had kind of looked up Phoenix, and they always had these real like flame or just smoky backgrounds. And I thought for a while how to achieve that look. And this was a technique I haven't tried before in a video that I thought would work really well. Now I'm using some of the Sunset Orange, which is going to match my reddish orange Phoenix that I have. So once again, adding that blending solution, the Snow Cap mix, you can see it does kind of tint that orange a little bit. It lightens it, it brightens it up a little bit. And then also some of that Gilded. So adding little bits, I'm just kind of pushing that air around and the ink around so it has those wispy edges. Now you can go back and forth, just side to side till you get that wispy edge that you're looking for. And then I usually take these and set them off to side to dry on a paper towel. Now this last one here that I had done, I brought in some alcohol ink or some isopropyl alcohol. And I usually like using that with alcohol inks, but it really wasn't working for me on the Yupo paper, so I did end up bringing in the blending solution. So you could use either or. It's more of an experiment. Like I said, lots of fun that can be had with it to just play and create a bunch of backgrounds. You could die cut from this too, but I would make sure to let that dry completely before trying to do any die cutting from it. Now your drying time is going to vary just depending on how much ink you have added and how much has pooled up in certain areas. It will take a little while to dry. So mine was about 10 to 15 minutes. When I set these off on the side to dry, I'm going to work on other factors of my card. I'm going to start by just adding some of those extra touches to the Phoenix wings, starting with a small blending tool or a dauber. I'm using a little finger dauber here and the Hero Arts embossing ink, and I'm just taking that and applying it to the tips of the wings and the tail. Now that's really hard to see on the white because you can't really tell how far you're going in. I don't think you can really go wrong with it. But I'm just doing one side to start with so I have somewhere to hold and I can see where everything is going to be. So after I get that on, I'm going to sprinkle on some of the Hero Arts gold embossing powder, tap off any of that excess onto a scratch piece of paper, and then I can melt that with my embossing tool. So I'm going to give that just a few seconds to cool off, and then I can work on the other side. So once again, just taking that finger dauber and adding some of that embossing ink to the very tips and around the wings. And then once again, adding on that embossing powder. So this is why I wanted to wait on the red one, is because I wanted to make sure that any embossing powder is only going to stick to where I want it and not to the entire thing. Then once again, just tapping off that excess and melting with my embossing gun. Now I was having a flashback to my childhood here. This kind of reminded me of the She-Ra emblems. So I was really enjoying this process on the white cardstock. Next, I'm going to work on my orange one that I had done some of the reddish ink blending to. And then once again, just adding that bits of embossing ink to the edges. Now, what was really cool about this, and these are things that you just can't plan out, is that some of the ink really wasn't quite dry, and it's going to leave behind little speckles of the embossing powder. I'll show you close up here in just a moment, but it just turned out really cool. I really love it. If I could figure out how to repeat that, I would. But they're just kind of things that happen when you're crafting you don't expect, and you get really happy with the results. So I'm going to melt that here on the reddish orange one, and look at those little speckles. It just looks so cool on this reddish orange one. I wanted to have some powerful and encouraging messages to go with these cards. I am using the Shine Bright stamp set and also a sentiment off of the Heart Tree. I'm going to stamp these on some Dove White cardstock from Hero Arts, and I will be stamping them in the Intens-ified black ink. Once I have them stamped, I am going to take them to my paper trimmer and I'm going to trim them down into some small rectangles. I do end up kind of trimming them a little bit more to fit on my card because the Phoenix is quite large and I didn't really plan out where I was placing them. So I do trim them down quite a bit so that they'll fit onto my card front. Now, another thing I wanted to do was add some dimension to my Phoenix. And to do that, I die cut 2 more from white cardstock. So I will have 3 layers to 1 Phoenix. So I did a lot of die cutting off screen, and I'm taking the Hero Arts precision glue and I'm just adding little dabs or little dots of glue to the wings and the tail, and then just kind of holding that with my tweezers, and then I can attach it to the other layer. So 3 layers for 1 bird. I did that for all of the cards. I just carefully line up the tips of the wings, and that's one thing that's really good about using the precision glue is you have a little bit of wiggle room before it's really secure onto the next layer. Then I can add my final layer here that has the gold wings. And I did do another one with the gold off screen so that I could use all 3 of my alcohol inked backgrounds. Now I put something heavy on it to kind of just let that sit for a couple minutes, like your Misty tool, or if you have any blocks, you could do that too. And then using that liquid glue again and adding it to the card front. So here's one of the card fronts that I did that has the 2 color blues to it. And these I'll also put like my Misty tool on or something for just a couple minutes because I really want that to stay attached to the card front. Now, some of the sentiments I added using a tape runner, and I think one of them I did use some foam squares, just depending on the size of the sentiment, how it fit, and where it was going to go on my card. This finishes off the first card. Now, I kept the design the same on all of them just for simplicity purposes, and I also just really liked the placement of everything. Here is that orangish background that I'm going to pair with my reddish orange phoenix. And to be honest, I really wasn't sure how these were going to look. So I'm really happy with the result because once you add the phoenix to it, it just makes the entire card. And then here is the last background I did. This is just using the cobalt, I believe. So it was just the one blue. And all of that gold shimmer really matches the gold embossing that I added to the tips of the wings. So there is a look at all three of them. These were really fun and actually quite quick to complete. I hope you enjoyed today's inspiration using the Phoenix Bird Fancy Die. I want to thank you so much for joining me today, and I'll see you again real soon.